they say they're allowed to take their phones out and use them in class.
Oh, wow.
I think middle school is awful. Teachers are not allowed to take their phones, but they can call administration to come take your phone. Kids are exposed to so much more.
Right.
You know, they are on social media. They're watching movies and things that, 12-year-olds should not be watching.
Right. Super excited. Today we are sitting down with Amanda, who was born and raised in Gainesville, went through the public school system here in Gainesville, also then became a teacher, and now is raising her family here in Gainesville and got kids in school. So tons of education around her. We're going to pick her brain a little bit to learn all about education in Gainesville. Thanks so much for being here. I'm excited to talk to you.
Happy to be here.
Over all that time, how have you seen teaching and education change in Gainesville over the time?
It has changed a lot.
Right.
The turnover of school board has changed. The expectations for the students, like the state standards, those things have increased. The testing is so much more
Right.
than it was even when I was growing up, even when I taught 15 years ago. All of that is more intense. There's more expectations. I've also seen technology grow a lot. Lots of everything's on the computer now. Every classroom has their own iPad set.
Right.
Every kid has their own iPad. They get on, they do all of their learning, a lot of learning on an iPad. And that's very different than when I was growing up, there was maybe a computer lab, if you were lucky. And now everyone has their own computer.
Yeah.
I think as far as seeing how teachers have changed, back when we were younger, teachers had a lot more flexibility with how they taught, what they taught. Now you very much have to follow a pacing guide, and you have to follow the curriculum, and the test dates are set for you by the county. So everything's you have to follow everything.
How hard is that for teachers? I mean, you have, 20-ish kids, and you have to stay on what kind of feels like a daily schedule to work towards a test. But you've got 5, 10, especially post-COVID, kids that are not where they should be.
Yeah.
How can a teacher just push through?
I mean, you really do have to push through, which is unfortunate. But a lot of teachers, we take that time for small group. During our instruction, we just block out times in each block of so a reading block, we have a small group time.
Okay.
And that can be remediation or enrichment, depending on what that group needs.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of that time that you take and go back. You're still giving them the test. If the test is on Tuesday, you're still giving the test. But then you might see, these 3 kids didn't learn this. You use that in your small group time to remediate.
Okay.
But you don't remediate the whole class.
Right.
Because
you
got to keep moving.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you mentioned the expectations. So, and I don't know if you know exactly, but would you say the standards for learning and the benchmarks for students have been increasing over the last 20, 30 years? Or are our standards the same or lower?
I would say from what I've seen, and I feel like what we learned in 2nd and 3rd grade 30 years ago is now what they're expecting 1st graders to learn.
Okay.
So you're just expecting a lot more at a younger age.
Okay.
When we entered kindergarten in the, early 90s,
Right.
You were going into kindergarten to learn how to read. Now you're behind if you don't read in kindergarten. So that's just a big jump. They're expecting a lot more. They're expecting kids to go to pre-K, to start going to school when they're 3 years old. And so all of that is building up to where they should be in kindergarten. Whereas it wasn't like that when we were growing up.
What about on the teaching side of things, the expectations, the quality of teacher, the average teacher at the average school? Are you still getting and seeing top quality, dedicated, focused career teachers? Or are these, we're going to try it out and they come and go? Or what do you see in the teaching pool?
You're going to see both. You're going to see some really great teachers that have grown up wanting to be a teacher their whole life.
Okay.
And they are going to invest all of their time and their money and their effort, and it's their world.
Right.
And then you're going to have the teachers that, you know, whatever they wanted to do didn't really work out, and teaching is just getting a certificate sometimes. And so they go into the classroom and they can be great. They can be okay.
Right.
And then, you know, every once in a while you'll get a teacher that, you know, it's their year before retirement and they are out the door. And not that they're not great, but they're kind of.
Well, I would think if teaching has changed a fair amount, where you are sort of continually teaching to a standard and being told the schedule you need to stay on and the page of the workbook and all of those details, the creativity that may have drawn originally great teachers to educate kids their way has now been sort of washed away, and it's more robotic.
Yeah.
And that may come through in the teacher also.
There's not a lot of time for, oh, I really want to teach this. And it's not necessarily in the curriculum.
Okay.
Or like I used to love to do read alouds.
Okay.
And then at the end of the read aloud, we would have some sort of like a writing activity, or maybe we'd watch the movie of the book or whatever it was. And it's like, to fit that in is so hard. And giving that, like, that was my joy. And taking that away and making it to where you have to make sure you get all of these done first does make it a little like,
so,
you know.
Along those same lines, what would you consider to be like the biggest challenge current teachers are facing?
I think the expectations of where the kids should be and kind of where they're at.
Okay.
And the standards that we hold them to and the pace that we hold them to, and actually what students can do. And also, a lot of it requires a lot of parent support. So if you are in an area or in a school or just in a classroom where you have not as much parent support, those kids are going to suffer.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Right. Well, and that's one thing we've seen being parents, and as we volunteer and get involved, it makes a huge difference because the teacher has a bunch of kids, a bunch of responsibility.
Yeah.
But my mom was in a principal, and she taught at all levels. But when she was principal, it was just outside of Gainesville, small town. And she said it was extremely difficult because there's basically zero parent involvement. And the students really struggled, and they didn't have accountability when they went home.
Yeah.
And this was at the high school level. So I can imagine if a student doesn't have help and support at home at the younger in elementary school, it's just going to be on the teacher who can't do that.
Yeah.
Give each kid that much time.
I think that's the biggest struggle, and you will see that at any school, no matter where you go. There's always going to be a few kids that just need way more parent support, and you as a teacher can call and you can beg them and you can offer them the world, and sometimes they can't for whatever reason. They work too much, or they have other priorities, and you know, but without the parent support, that makes it the hardest for the teachers, I think.
Well, I know I've got a lot of customers as they come into town and they're trying to get their bearings, figure things out. Are there schools on the public school side in Gainesville, if you're looking at elementary school, where you say like, yeah, really, these are the only good schools? Or how would a new person to Gainesville figure out the ideal school or the best school within the public school system?
So I think you would send them to the school ratings, right? I would look at, so most of our schools are neighborhood schools. And so I would look at the neighborhoods near that school.
Right.
Just visually, you can kind of see. I would ask around.
Okay.
I would, I personally would probably go into each school that I was thinking about being like moving to, and I would ask for a tour.
And is that, I remember we did it with daycares and we would just pop by.
Yeah.
Is that what you would do for schools? Is it just popping in, or do you need a schedule, or what?
So it depends on the principal.
Okay.
And And it also depends on their day.
Right.
But so we started at Hidden Oak
Okay.
when my oldest was in kindergarten. And I happened to know the principal just from working in the schools. And so I felt confident in where we were zoned. And I was like, okay, this is fine. And then we decided to actually move. And we were going to be zoned for Childs. And I don't know if this is a good school. And so I just popped in one day, and the principal was gracious and accepting and was like, do you want a tour? Do you want to look around?
Oh, yeah.
Very kind. And so I learned a lot in that. I mean, it was a 10-minute tour,
Right.
and I was like, oh, okay, this is how this school is,
Right.
Most principals will at least accept you into the office and talk to you, and you'll get a feel for how that school is just by how the principal.
That makes sense. And it's sort of a top down, right? Like hopefully if the principal is that way with you, that feeds to the administration, teachers, everything else. On the flip side, you even mentioned all of the turnover at the school board level, superintendents. And how much is that impacting all the way down to the teacher? When you have constant turnover, it's also hard to execute on long-term plans.
Yeah.
Like they're talking about rezoning, but that's been a discussion for 10 years.
Yeah.
And if you have a new superintendent every few years, you can't complete big tasks.
Yeah.
How much is that impacting overcrowding and everything else going on?
So I think all the turnover within the school board, it does trickle down. So the principals get a little anxiety about what might be coming. I know our principal used to always be like, hey, heads up, I heard about this. It may affect us, it may not, but just heads up.
Right.
And so if you have a leader like that kind of guides you and creates a community within the teachers, it's a little better.
Okay.
But we as teachers always hear from the school board, this might happen, or this might happen, or this new person is in charge now. Those things. It makes the teachers a little uneasy because they don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, there's a lot of work that goes in as the teacher, but then it's not. Another person comes into the school board and we don't have to actually do what we just did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like we've had to scan all of our library books, and that takes hours and hours and hours.
Right.
And then it was said, oh, we're not really checking it. So you've done all this.
Right.
These sorts of things happen because of the turnover.
Right.
Or when a principal changes schools.
Yeah.
Those things happen.
There's a different vision, different plans, and
but I think that would happen in any business, right? Anyone that takes over is going to change things. So
I'm curious. You've been a teacher and now parent with kids in school. Is there anything that pretty much all teachers wish parents knew, but they're not able to just come out and say it? Like, what's one piece of information you wish you could pass along to all parents out there so they knew about their teachers?
I think it's hard for teachers to tell parents, like, I do have a life other than this classroom.
Yeah.
And not that that isn't their life. I was a teacher who every parent had my cell phone number. They could text me anytime. But I also am hard. I can't say no.
Okay.
So I would go home and I would have parents texting me at 5, 6, 7 o'clock, and I would always answer. And then that's taking away from my family.
Right.
And I know a lot of teachers like that. And then other teachers would not be so open. They just wouldn't respond to you.
Right.
And then the parents would be offended. Like, I called, I emailed, whatever, and the teacher didn't get back to me until the next day. And they're offended.
Right.
Which I get both sides completely, but I just think sometimes teachers just want parents to know, I'm going to give my all.
Right.
But, at 3 o'clock, I'm done and I have my family or my life or whatever. Right. And sometimes parents don't understand that. Right. I'm a parent. There's times when I want an answer at 5:30 also.
Right. Absolutely.
So
sort of setting that expectation where some teachers are going to clock out and they'll get back to you when they get back to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some teachers do say, I'm not available from after 4 o'clock.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right.
Those teachers are wonderful. They set their boundaries.
Okay. Well, I'm curious, one thing that it seems like it's come up more recently over the last 5-10 years is discipline in the classroom and kids acting out or fights or, resource officers being more active in Alachua County and Gainesville schools, how much do you see or have you heard that discipline and fights and that sort of thing, is that a significant issue across the board, certain schools?
I mean, I do think certain schools are going to have more significant issues than other schools, but I think across the board, there's discipline issues.
Okay.
It depends on what the discipline issue is.
Right.
So teachers and resource officers and the behavior resource teachers, they have limitations as to what they can do.
Right.
Back when we were younger, if you did something wrong, you were suspended.
Right.
You were sent to the principal's office. Now teachers have to give kids 5, 6 chances to make the right choice when the first time should have been, a demerit of some sort,
Right.
You can't put your hands on kids. Teachers can't break up a fight.
Okay.
So if there is a fight happening, you have to call the resource officer or an administrator and they have to break it up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Teachers can't
get involved.
Can't touch a kid.
Right.
And so I think that makes things a little worse sometimes because they can escalate.
Right.
You have to be really careful what you say to a kid because they can turn around and say, well, the teacher was bullying me. And that's not really the case.
Right.
So I think discipline across the board has gotten worse. I was at Childs.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see that many fights.
Okay.
But it's a K through 5.
Right.
Not as many fights, but a lot more of the kids being allowed to be disrespectful, and the teachers can't even really demand respect because they're not getting in trouble if they're not respectful.
Okay.
But then that kind of goes down to like the parental support and
Right.
all of those. So it kind of all feeds each other.
Well, it seemed like when I was in school, I could be wrong, but I thought there was a specific school that kids would get sent to if they had multiple discipline issues. They would get taken out of their zone school and go to, was it?
Aquin Jones.
Yeah.
Well, there was, yes.
Is that down?
So Aquin Jones is still there.
Okay.
I know it's for high school.
Okay.
I want to say it might be for middle school also.
Okay.
Elementary school kids can go to a program called Character Counts.
Okay.
And the problem with that, like I had one student that finally was sent there, and I think it was the best environment for him because it was not working in the public school. But he must have had 15 to 20 referrals in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
And his parents had to consent for him to go.
Oh.
So, and they wouldn't. For the longest time, they would not consent. And so the only option is for us to take him.
Right.
And that was very unfair for the rest of the class.
Right.
I mean, it was really hard. He finally, I think they kind of were like, you have to say yes at this point, but parents have to consent to them getting sent anyplace else. And sometimes, typically with those kids, the parents don't consent.
Right.
So.
Now, I've talked to a lot of people about it, but I expect over the next few years things to continue to progress and change with the new voucher, the state voucher. That's the biggest difference is it's not income based. So I've seen way more people applying. It seems like some people very knowledgeable and have submitted for it and use it. And some people I talk to have no idea what it is or have any information about it. Being a teacher in public school, how do you see the voucher changing locally our schools over the next 5 years, and what it means for private schools, charter schools, and then what it means for the kids who would stay in public school?
Yeah. So the vouchers are very popular. I know a lot of parents who are using them. The only problem that I really see with the vouchers is now our private schools are getting full.
Right.
And so these parents that are now starting to think, oh, I want to go to private school, they're having a harder time getting in.
Okay.
Because there's such an influx of students into the private school sector in our system. I also see private schools popping up a little bit more.
Right. Yep.
So, like I just heard the other day, there's another one opening next year. That's a K through 5.
Okay.
And so it'll just open up more doors. Like some of the private schools we have just don't have the ability to grow any bigger,
Right.
and they're at capacity. And I would say for the most part, a lot of their students are using the voucher.
Right.
So the vouchers are giving us a lot more opportunity, a lot more options. But at some point, I think the public or the private school sector is going to be over.
In full.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless, as long as, depending on what, it's, I mean, a business in a sense. So if there's demand, probably another school will open.
Yeah.
And then I'm guessing over time that continues to pull teachers away from public school. Have you seen teachers who maybe aren't vested and have retirement and all that good stuff built up? Are they leaving public school?
Yeah. So the ones that are, 30s, 40s, 20s.
Right.
If they can, they'll go to private school. The private schools don't all offer health insurance.
Okay.
Their pay is not as well.
Okay.
So that does factor in to their decision. The positive of these kids being pulled out is some of the public schools are now seeing smaller class sizes.
Okay.
Which is a positive.
Right.
I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
So, and I would say to anybody that's looking for a house and they're looking at schools, I would look at their class sizes. If that's important to the parents. To me, I don't like when my kids are in a class of over 20 kids.
Yeah.
Anywhere, whether it's private or public.
It's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids. And as a teacher, I know I had a class of 16 and it was amazing. And I had a class of 23 and it was really hard to teach all of those kids because they all have different needs. No matter where you're looking, public or private, I would ask about class sizes.
Are the majority of schools, public schools in Gainesville, beyond capacity? Or are most of the class sizes
Most of the schools are at the top of their numbers.
Okay.
So depending on what the ratio is, they are right there.
Okay.
If it says you can have 24 in 4th and 5th grade, you probably have somewhere between 23 and 26.
Okay.
So, which is a lot of 4th and 5th graders in one class.
Yeah.
So
coming from the teaching side, if you had a magic wand and you could change or fix just one thing for all public schools, what would you wave the wand and what would it accomplish?
I think this is so crazy, but I would take away the testing.
Okay.
Not that I would take away testing completely, because I do think we have to assess what our children have learned, and I think we have to hold them to a standard, and we have to know that they're meeting those standards. So I think testing is not necessarily the evil part, but the build up to all the tests, the expectations, just last year, all the kids had to start taking the test on the computer.
Okay.
And if they are not good at using a mouse, that affects their testing.
Yeah.
Because they might click the wrong thing and they don't realize they're clicking the wrong thing. And so I think I would take away the computer-based testing and the frequency of it.
Okay.
And maybe go back to paper pencil. I know that makes me sound old, and doing it, at the end of the year, or maybe a beginning and a pre and post assessment of the year.
Okay.
And not holding the teachers so accountable, if more basing it on growth.
Okay.
Because like in 3rd grade, you are scored based on how your kids do and based on what they get. But if a kid came in as a 1 and scores a 3 at the end of the year, you've made progress.
Right.
But it doesn't look like you've done that great because they only made a 3.
Right.
So,
but
you have a kid that started at a 5 and ends at a 5. Wow, you did great. Good job.
Right.
It's like, but I didn't really do anything for them. They, so holding that accountability for the teachers needs to be changed, I think.
Okay.
I answered, that's like a lot of things that the magic wand fixes.
Well, but that would be, it makes sense, the testing, because then that, again, frees up the teacher to be a little bit more flexible throughout the year and work with kids in different ways.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about discipline and that sort of stuff. I hear sort of the buzzword is bullying.
Mhm.
How much kid on kid bullying is happening in Gainesville? Like, is this a significant issue? Is this blown up, or just a few headlines here and there, or are kids struggling to learn because they're getting bullied?
So I taught elementary school.
Okay.
There is some bullying in elementary school, more like mean girl type stuff, but not as detrimental. Middle school,
Mm-hmm.
from friends that I've had that have told me stories and what I've heard, middle school is very, very tough. And it is true. Like it is happening.
Yeah.
It's out there.
Is
Um,
do you know, is it in person on campus, or is it all online?
so
Like
I think
all
it's
social
both.
and
I
okay.
think it is both. Like, of course, social media makes it difficult.
Right.
Kids having cell phones that they can text each other ugly things, that happens. Um, but I've also heard of kids just walking in the hallway and, saying something mean to somebody and then also telling their friend, like talking about a person to their friends right in front of them, where it's like,
It I
so,
mean, we both went through
mhm.
school here, and there was some bullying, but do you think what's happening now is different than what happened 20 years
Yes.
ago? It is? Okay.
Yes. I think kids are exposed to so much more.
Right.
They are on social media. They're watching movies and things that, 12-year-olds should not be watching.
Right.
And then they're portraying some of that into
Okay.
their own lives.
Okay.
And I mean, I do think the bullying is worse.
Okay.
I do think administrators are addressing it, but it's not like enough.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing their hands are kind of tied.
Yeah.
Like, there's only so much, again, whether it's physical fighting or bullying and verbal stuff, there's probably only so much that can be done, and they're getting a slap on the wrist,
Mhm. And again, they're needing the parent to
Right.
support them.
Yeah.
I do know there is something called a bullying referral
Okay.
now, where if there is actual proof that one student is bullying another, whether that's on a text message or a piece of paper or a video or whatever, they can get a bullying referral. And apparently that's worse than a regular referral.
Okay.
But I don't know that there's really anything that's done past that,
Right.
and discussing it with parents. But, if oftentimes if the parents can't fix it, the school's
Right.
not going to fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to be addressed, and it starts at
Yeah.
home and then
Yeah.
go from there.
Yeah.
Along those same lines, I remember I was volunteering with a program at Buholtz,
Mhm.
and I hadn't been back on campus in 15 years, and it was shocking walking through the halls in between each class break. Felt like every single kid, head down, looking at their phone,
Yeah.
earbuds in, very little socializing, but everyone on phones.
Mhm.
I'm guessing and hoping those go away in class, but do all schools have the same cell phone policies, or is it up to the teacher, or how much is that impacting the classroom?
So the schools can't say the kids can't bring the cell phones to school.
Okay.
They're supposed to be in their backpacks, but it is teacher based.
Okay.
It can also be principal based.
Okay.
But they are not supposed to pull them out in class. However, I do have some friends at Kannapahaw who say that their teachers have them use their phones for certain things, whether it's
wow.
the calculator or looking up on the internet for the history class or whatever it is. They say they're allowed to take their phones out and use them in class.
Oh, wow.
They're allowed to take them out walking the halls,
Right.
at lunch. I mean, they all do it. So I don't know if it's actually not allowed,
Right.
but the mass of students that do it, it's like,
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they all have them.
Well, and again, it's sort of the exposure issue. I mean, you may have certain rules for your kid and your household, but then they're going into an environment where, I mean, kids can access anything they want, and then the supervision, it's not like there's a monitor or someone
No.
walking around looking at screens to see what's being done on that phone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. They're definitely getting a lot of exposure from friends who have phones that don't have limitations.
Right.
Like my son has a phone and he basically can do nothing but call us or text us.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that he's not sitting at lunch with someone that has a phone
Yeah.
that has he can't really get on the internet.
Okay. Yeah.
But someone else
Right.
might not have that restriction on their phone and he's not going to look at his phone.
Right.
He's going to, what's my friend
Oh,
doing
yeah.
over there?
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens along with the bullying. A lot of the kids are taking their phones at lunch and sending text messages.
Right.
Yeah. Mean ones like, I see you eating that pizza or whatever it is,
Yeah.
And that stuff is happening while you're at school on your cell phone.
Yeah.
And
we're taking some awkward photo and then it goes out.
And sharing it with yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So like those sorts of things, those didn't happen when we were kids. I don't even remember when I taught 15 years ago that stuff was happening.
Yeah.
But now, even in elementary school, 4th and 5th graders have cell phones and they bring them.
It's getting younger and younger.
So not that elementary school is a little bit stricter with the phones, obviously, but it does still happen.
Do you know at middle school or high school level, can a teacher say, yeah, you can have your phone in class, but it goes in this box? Can a teacher remove the phone? Or if they're using it while taking a test, is a teacher allowed to take a phone away?
So from a friend that is in middle school, she told me that teachers are not allowed to take their phones, but they can call administration to come take your phone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think she was told that by one of the teachers, like, I'm actually not allowed to take your phone, but I can call Mr. So-and-so and they can come get it. And I tend to believe that that's true. Like teachers have kind of lost a lot of their ability to do things.
Yeah.
So they probably can only say it has to go in your backpack.
Right.
Yeah.
Man. So interesting. I'm curious if you had, say, you had a relative or a good friend, they're going to move to Gainesville and they're asking you about schools. Would you just tell them, hey, go to this elementary, this middle, this high? Would you say this part of town? Like, how would you educate a best friend on what schools they should consider and what schools to skip?
So I'd probably give them a list of elementary schools.
Yeah.
Every elementary school is not going to have amazing teachers in every single grade. It is a teacher, like a grade based, you might have a great teacher in kindergarten, a not so great in first grade. That's going to happen no matter where you go.
Right.
Private, public, east side, north side, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, there are schools that I would tend to send my kids to or recommend based on the community, the types of families and children that are going to be there. And so I would lead them towards those schools. Do you
mind sharing, like, for elementary school, what's the first school that pops off that?
For elementary school, I would send my kids to Talbot, Meadowbrook, Hidden Oak, Childs.
Okay.
Maybe Wiles.
Okay.
Those would be my choices. That's based on the administration, the teachers, the types of families that are there. They're all diverse.
Right.
They all have their own discipline issues. They have phenomenal teachers. They have not so great teachers.
Yep.
But as a whole, in that environment and what I know my kids are going to be exposed to, I would choose those schools.
Yeah. Well, makes sense. We were actually 3 boys, all went through Talbot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think we ever duplicated a teacher.
Yeah.
Even though, different ages.
Mm-hmm.
And it was eye-opening. We'd have one great kindergarten teacher and then one, what we felt like, terrible kindergarten teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, across the spectrum, it was overall a good experience.
Yeah.
The administration was good. They were receptive if we had problems.
Yeah.
We had some minor challenges here and there, but overall we were pleased with the school and we weren't overly concerned about bullying or fights or anything like that at elementary school level.
Yeah.
If you go on to middle schools, do you have this would probably be one and done, or they're all terrible?
Middle schools are really rough. Middle school is a very rough age.
Yeah.
For any kid. Some of the middle schools have magnets
Right.
that I would encourage a friend to look into
Okay.
if they definitely didn't want to go private.
Okay.
I personally sent my kids to private middle school.
Okay.
The schools are so big in middle
Yeah.
school. I have not found the administration to be stellar at any of the middle schools. Some of the teachers again are great and they love teaching middle school, and some are just there because they can teach biology to seventh graders and they need a job.
Right.
They're so big and they're so overcrowded.
Yeah.
And I think that is my hesitation.
Okay.
Is just how big they are,
Right.
how many fights happen,
Okay.
and how much like external exposure my kids would have. I think the education is probably fine.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
It's the other aspects
Right.
of middle school.
Okay.
So I don't really have one that I would
Yeah.
totally recommend.
And you mentioned the magnet programs. I know at the high school level, the magnet programs, like at Eastside, you feel like you're at a different school than the general population kids.
Right.
Is that handled the same way at middle school, or is it just one or two extra classes for?
Yeah, the middle schools are a little bit more integrated.
Okay.
Like I know Fort Clark has the REACH program, and so you do, 2 or 3 classes in there, but you're
Okay.
still PE, band, music, whatever elective you take is
Okay.
with everybody, obviously. And then not your core classes are
Okay.
going to be kind of with everybody. So kind of separated, but not like East Side, not
Right.
like the IB program.
Okay. Well, and then at the high school level, 2 questions. If you're looking at a magnet program, any that stand out, or would you only send your kids to public high school if they're going into a magnet program, or are the general classes and general schools reasonable enough that they would be considered, or are they?
I think from what I know,
Right.
I don't have any kids in high school yet, but they all have pretty good magnet programs, and I would probably try to get them in some sort of magnet program, just so that they have a path
Right.
and they have like a core group of kids
Yeah.
that they're with for whatever that program is.
Right.
But they're all different, like Buchholz has the finance, GHS has Cambridge, and then they also have the health professions. And so if you're in those groups, I feel like you have your core friends, you have a group of kids that you're with,
Right.
and then you are kind of with others as well. But
It seems like high school, everything has kind of balanced back out. It seems like middle school is the peak when kids are the most confused,
Yeah.
or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
sort of figuring things out.
Yeah.
And that peaks in middle school. And then by the time you get back to high school, you have your groups, your cliques, and everyone's kind of settled, and they're more focused on themselves
Yeah.
than outward projecting any sort of issues.
Right.
In general, do you hear of less issues at the high school level? Is that kind of how it plays out, or is it still lots of bullying, lots of fights? Like, is it as bad as middle school?
I think middle school is awful.
Okay.
I think it's just a really weird time in a kid's life. So I think the bullying and the fighting is probably the worst in middle school.
Okay.
I do think that stuff happens in high school, but again, if you are with your group, you're not seeing it as much.
Okay.
Like in high school, lots of kids form their groups. They have like their sports team or their magnet, or they're in band or whatever that is. And those aren't typically the kids that are causing a lot of those issues.
Okay.
So I think if you just have if your kid they have their head straight and they know what they're doing by high school,
Right.
those issues kind of fade. I think middle school is
Okay.
is just tough.
We talked a lot about parent involvement. And, of course, you don't want to put any added pressure that the kid doesn't need, but is there any advice to parents of how they can best support their kids in the education? Is it just, accountability, or is it sort of micromanaging? Like how can a parent best support their kid without pushing it too far?
I think parents should check in with their kids every day
Okay.
with, do you have any homework? When is this book report due? Checking what they need to do academically. Also in the elementary years, I would say making sure that your kid really does read for 20 minutes every
Okay.
night. I know that's crazy and every teacher says it and parents are like, I don't have 20 minutes.
Right.
But the difference that it makes, and you can really tell, like as a teacher, I can tell,
Yeah.
oh, you read 20 minutes every night,
Right.
and then, oh, you don't. And
Okay.
it makes such a huge difference
Yeah.
that I think every teacher wants the parents just read with them for 20
Okay.
minutes. And so I would say, like, really making sure that they're doing their homework, that they know what they're learning,
Okay.
and teaching them how to be responsible for all of those things. Because by the time they get to middle school,
Right.
you want them to be able to say, hey, I have a test this day, I need to study, and you want them to start to take that responsibility.
Right.
So I think in elementary school, just guiding them on how to be responsible for themselves.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising how challenging middle school is and how many issues there are at those ages. One thing that I've also seen, at least with a lot of customers, it seems like changing over time, is homeschooling. I mean, I remember when I was a kid here, we would occasionally have a homeschooler on the soccer team, but they were outliers. Like homeschooling
Yeah.
was not that popular or that common. Do you see that demographic or that group growing a lot? A lot more people homeschooling? Is it easy to plug into? Is it?
Yeah. Homeschooling is getting big here.
Okay.
There's lots of families that homeschool. There's a lot of homeschool co-ops that are really easy to kind of plug into.
Okay.
I go to the park and meet people that are homeschooling.
Yep.
We play sports with different leagues, and every team we've ever had has had someone that's homeschooling.
Yeah.
And that's not like it was back when I was younger, but I think it is an easy in Alachua County. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for homeschool families.
Because there's Florida Virtual, but then there's a lot of other programs to
Yeah.
plug into. And because we were actually looking at it right after COVID, because we were home with the kids, and it was shocking how little time it took me to go through the classwork.
Yeah.
And so then we had the whole rest of the day to
Yes.
play and hang out and do
So
fun
really,
stuff.
you can teach everything that you need to teach your kid in 2 or 3 hours,
Yeah.
depending on if they have any, special areas they need help with. But really, you can homeschool a day in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then I know a lot of friends that are in homeschool co-ops that they all meet together like one day a week for science.
Okay.
So they don't actually teach much science throughout the week, but on that Thursday, they go for 3 or 4 hours. They do a lab, they do an experiment, they do all sorts of things with one parent that is good at teaching science.
Right.
And so they all get that science credit through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've
And they
heard.
can do that for different subjects.
Yeah.
There are programs where parents can just go a couple days a week to like a learning center, and the kids take their math class online.
Okay.
There's all sorts of online opportunities, but I know a lot of parents they just buy a curriculum and teach it at their house.
Right.
And they all love it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure homeschooling is another way that parents are just managing the exposure, right? Because at the public school level, little to no control between the parents and teachers. And then you go to private school or church-based school, there's a little bit more control, a little bit more balance between both parents and teachers,
Yeah.
and then homeschool, full control. Well, I'm curious, when it comes to homeschooling, we talked a little bit about the vouchers and that being applied towards private schools. Do you know, on the homeschooling level, can they apply for some sort of similar voucher or
Yeah.
funding so it's not a financial issue?
Yeah, so the voucher covers a lot. The voucher covers homeschooling. You can also get the voucher to cover tutoring services.
Okay.
For the homeschooling, you just let them know what you're using the money for. So you show them, I bought this curriculum, or I'm paying for my membership fee for this co-op.
Okay.
Whatever it is.
It's a reimbursement.
It's a reimbursement. So they don't actually give you they give you an allotted money, like whatever it is, say $7,000.
Okay.
You have this you can spend, but you let them know what you're going to buy, and you can either buy it first and they reimburse you, or you can wait for the money.
Oh, okay.
I've heard waiting for the money takes a little while.
Right.
So, but I know that you can get money for your homeschool, and it pays for even memberships to museums,
right,
things like that.
Well, and we had a friend, they homeschool, and they mentioned that a lot of stuff can fall under a PE category. And
Like
so
a Flip Factory membership.
They were doing like training or exercising or gym membership, those sort of things.
Yes.
And it falls under PE, and so they were getting reimbursed.
Like Sun Country opened a homeschool fitness class.
Yeah.
And people are using their voucher to pay for that.
Interesting.
So, and then you get your PE credit through that.
Well, again, it's nice at least to have some more options.
Yeah.
When it goes back to Alachua County and the public schools in Gainesville, I mean, all parents, we want to just build our kids up and get them prepared to contribute in society, right? And be valued members contributing to something bigger. Do you feel like where the Alachua County public schools are right now, do they have that same goal? Like, would you say the public school system in Gainesville is also building these kids up to be excellent members of society?
I do think that is their goal.
Okay.
I do think there are teachers out there that follow that goal. Good and bad.
Right.
Everywhere. But I do think a lot of teachers really do want the kids to become good humans who can read and write and be successful. Right. Each teacher only has the kid for a year.
Right.
And so that if you're lucky enough to continue to get teachers that are goal-oriented like that, then those kids are successful. I've seen so many kids come out of public school in Alachua County, very successful.
Right.
All of our friends, like I grew up here, all of our friends have made great choices, and they've gone to great colleges, and they have great careers, and they're all products of Alachua County Public Schools.
Right.
Most of my friends were public school.
Right.
That's changing now. You know, a lot of us are sending our kids to private school for some or all of their education, but I wouldn't say that the education in Alachua County is really the issue.
So it's the balance. It's the social side.
It's the social side. But that is the world we live in now.
Right.
So it's just how sheltered do you want to have your children be?
So most of those issues, would you say, are they specific to Gainesville, or you think this is just kind of the way things are now and then how you handle it?
I mean, I think it's just the world that we live in, but this is my little world.
Right.
So friends from other places have similar issues.
Okay.
Depending on where they live.
Okay.
Some live in great areas where they can send their kids to public school, and that works, and it's a great environment. Most of the time, if it's a neighborhood school and you've picked a good neighborhood, it's a good school.
Right.
Okay. So I would say, like, one thing I would tell parents, no matter what school you're going to, if the teacher's not working for your kid, like, advocate for your kid.
Okay.
Go to the principal, be involved. I mean, parent involvement is the most important thing. But if you have a teacher that really, like, they're like not clicking with your kid, and it's going to be an awful year, you have the right as a parent in private or public school to say, this is not working.
Right.
And advocate for them to change.
Okay.
Because it's a whole year.
Right.
That your kid is with that teacher.
Yeah.
And if it's not working,
it's not going to get better, probably.
no, we call those gap years where, like, the kid doesn't learn anything because it's just, it doesn't work.
Right.
And not every kid is going to click with every teacher, and every teacher's not going to click with every kid.
Right.
But the parent has to be the one that's fighting for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Parents have to stay involved and be aware of what's going on.
I feel like I'm putting a lot on the parents today.
Well, it's a balance. I mean, the parents need to know what's going on. I think we do have lots of times too high of expectations for teachers and parents. It's easy for a parent to just push everything onto the teacher, but it's almost sort of a checks and balance where you really need to be able to work with the teacher for the benefit of the kid.
Yeah.
And it's a team effort, I'd say. Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. Got a lot out of it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, if you enjoyed that interview with a local, you'll definitely want to check out some of these others where we talk all things Gainesville, where you can learn everything that you need to know.